Welcome to Moments with Marianne and Happy New Year. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very empowering show coming right up with special guest, Dr. Jennifer Kreatsoulas. And she's here today to share with us her new book, Body Mindful Yoga. Create a powerful and affirming relationship with your body. Now, Jennifer is a certified yoga therapist specializing in eating disorders and body image. She is an inspirational speaker and author and provides yoga therapy both online and in person and leads yoga therapy groups at Montanido's Eating Disorder Center of Philadelphia. She teaches workshops, retreats, and specializes in training for clinicians, professionals, and yoga teachers. Jennifer is a partner with the Yoga Body Image Coalition and writes for Yoga Journal and other influential blogs. She's appeared on Fox 29 News and has been featured in the Huffington Post, Real Women magazine, just to name a few. So let's welcome to the show Dr. Jennifer Kreatsoulas.
Thank you so much, Marianne. It's truly a delight to be here.
What a pleasure it is to have you here. And gosh, I love having this book. What a perfect way to start off the new year with Body Mindful Yoga. I mean, who doesn't want this?
Thank you very much. Hopefully it's a refreshing message compared to some of the messages we're bombarded with at the beginning of the year about needing to change ourselves, change our exteriors. This book is offering a little bit of a different approach to feeling more empowered and affirmed in our lives.
Well, I'm so glad that you brought that up. And before we dive into that too much, I would love for you to share a little bit with us about your inspiration, just getting into mindfulness and yoga. How did you even get on that path?
So my yoga journey began back in 2002. I was in graduate school, and I was a few years into recovery from an eating disorder. And yoga really resonated with me. It really gave me a space where I could be with other people, like-minded people, immersed in messages around self-kindness and self-compassion. It also gave me an avenue to continue healing from the eating disorder, especially that embodiment piece of having a way of being in my body that was very loving and safe. I had a bit of an exercise addiction that was a part of my eating disorder, so finding an activity that didn't trigger all that in me, but brought me home in a new way to myself was extremely healing and extremely powerful in my life. I began teaching shortly after I started practicing, did my training. I just felt really called to share this practice with other people, and taught for a really long time, probably a good 7 or 8 years before finishing graduate school, then getting married, and then having a full-time job, and then having kids, and yoga kind of fell away in that period of my life. And with all the newness and all the overwhelm and all the chaos of motherhood, and now, having a career and trying to balance it all, the eating disorder came back. And I really believe, the further out I was from having my yoga practice in my life, the bigger the opportunity for that, relapse to happen. So fast forward, relapse happened, and came out of that relapse with this very crystal clear awareness that I needed to make some changes. I needed to get myself back in my life. I needed to begin to get yoga back in my life and some of my other passions and things that I enjoyed that kind of disappeared as I, morphed into these roles as wife and mother. And I needed to expand my vision of myself, that I wasn't just locked into those roles, but it was me, and I was doing, I was in various roles, but it was all coming from my center, from me and things that make me me. And so I got back into yoga, and I actually started working with a coach to help me clarify some of my goals of what was the next step for me in my life. And that led me to training to be a yoga therapist, a 3-year training at Yoga Life Institute near Philadelphia, where I live, with my co-author, Robert Butera. And in that process of training to be a yoga therapist, decided that, my calling, my purpose was to work with others in recovery. That I had found myself in a very strong and healed place, and it was time for me now to give back to the community, and this was going to be my unique way to do it. And this is leading into the inspiration, I promise. So in that time period of training, I started to also lead a yoga therapy group at a local eating disorder treatment center called Montanito. And as I was preparing to begin that job, I had the realization that, I couldn't go in and teach yoga in the same way that I was trained to teach. And I had that intuition because of my own personal experience. And I knew what these men and women would be going through and how hard it would be for them to come into a yoga group and be present and be with their bodies and move their bodies and feel safe. So that really prompted me to think about language and the language we use as teachers, and how do we create emotional safety as we lead a physical practice. And in talking with my colleague about that, he made a statement that, it's great for us to go and educate teachers, but what's really important first is that we heal the language within ourselves, right? So that opened up this idea for focusing in on language and body image and how we could call on yoga to heal the language within ourselves and as a byproduct then feel more empowered in our bodies and affirmed in our lives. And now that the book's out, I've returned to creating trainings for teachers, and they're about to launch. So it's great that this inspiration has come full circle. And now, the book is in people's hands and hopefully making a difference.
Well, how exciting is that, especially when you talk about your journey? Because, here we are at the beginning of the year, and you're so right. Like, the number one message is for men and women that we get is that you need to change your physical appearance. This is the time of year where you can start those resolutions that most people never finish beyond the first month. And it's a lot of pressure to either look a certain way or be a certain way. And that can kind of, we can kind of get that under control in many ways with body mindful yoga. We're kind of coming more into a place of acceptance as a part instead of trying to control.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. We're so trained to look outward, to seek external validation to let us know that we are, in air quotes, okay, that our bodies are okay, that we measure up, we fit in. And yoga, with a capital Y, is the practice of turning inward, right? And learning to accept, like you said, and to connect inwardly. And this book is a path to that inward connection with that body image piece, kind of included.
Mm-hmm. To bring that kind of all together. Well, and so
exactly.
And is that what body mindful yoga is just that inward journey, or is there more to that?
I think there's more to that because I think we need to first, or maybe it's not first or second, it's more as part of that journey. I think we need to acknowledge the society that we live in and the messages that we're bombarded with and do a little, what we call in yoga, self-study around how, the messages say that we get around food or exercise, what we see on social media, the fashion ads, how does that impact us? And, how do we go from maybe feeling helpless to that to more empowered? And so I think that a lot of the work, the first half of our book is giving readers an opportunity to kind of look at, say, for example, morality language around food. We live in a world where food is either good or bad, right? And that again gets mapped onto our moral integrity. We're good if we eat this, but we're bad if we eat that. And that's a lot of shame that we start carrying over a lifetime about the very natural, pure act of nourishing ourselves, right? But that language can really get inside, and it can translate into how we feel about our bodies. Our bodies are bad, our bodies are good, our bodies are guilty, our bodies are, take up too much space because they're bad, right? Because of the food we ate. It's just this like it can just go so deep inside of us. And then in turn, because it's normalized, that language is normalized, we're talking like that in front of our kids, or we're talking about that with strangers, or we're just talking about that in our groups of friends. Maybe these are messages that our families have helped us to learn. And, we need to cut that out. Like, I'm a mom now, and so, because of my personal experience, I'll move mountains to keep my girls from ever having to feel like they're good or bad, intrinsically good or bad because of what they eat. That it's just so much shame. So first of all, how do we acknowledge that reality? And then how do we do some self-study inward around, well, where does that reaction, if I say I have a reaction to the word diet, like where does that come from? What's that really about? What's the story there? Because there probably is a story, and it probably combines something, a combination of social, cultural, familial, all kinds of, influences, right? And then how do we shift then to a more empowering message to give ourselves? And then how do we really integrate that in our lives and in our dialogues and in our conversations and model that for other people? And it's a process. It's a practice. We've been trained for probably most of our lives to think good or bad in relationship to food. So unraveling that takes time. And our book is really about the process of awareness around how language is affecting someone's self-esteem, body image, and a process then to begin to work on that.
Yeah.
So the second half, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I agree with you because it's such a journey going through that process. And you're going to say, what's the second half of this? Because I know our listeners are going, gosh, I need to get this because they by this.
Yeah, we're up against, it's a tall order, right, given the messages that we're surrounded by, but it's not impossible. I really do believe that. The second half of the book are the yoga practices. So the first half is self-study. It's a lot of self-reflection. We get into talking about morality language and food and combat language and fitness and a few other social messages with exercises to kind of get into that discourse and think about how is this language affecting me. And then the second half of the book is yoga practices. We provide a variety of types of practices because everyone's preferences are different. We have, traditional yoga poses, and we have auditory practices, visual practices like affirmations and mantras. And we also encourage people to tap into those activities that bring them calm and peace and ease. Maybe you're an artist, or maybe you enjoy nature, or taking a walk, or, whatever your quote-unquote yoga is, and using that as a space and time to begin integrating some new ways of thinking, some new language. We give examples of how to do that and examples of language, what we call body mindful language. And the practices are kind of a way to really wire that in. Now we're talking about the brain and neural pathways and the repetition of bringing in new language and how that affects the brain. And we do talk about that in the book. So it's not a fake it till you make it approach. It's really happening, right? If we're committed and make a little time to really value this process in our lives. And then the very last chapter is, well, how do we go out and model it? Because as we are working on ourselves, we can be helping others, believe it or not. So if I go to the grocery store and just simply refrain from talking to the stranger next to me in line about, the good or bad food I just bought, and I eliminate that, well, then I've modeled something different in the grocery store. And it sounds so silly, but if you're to eavesdrop on people's conversations, a lot of the time they're very shaming, right? And they directly connect with our bodies and how we feed them. So just the act of eliminating that is a way to begin making a shift in the world, even if it's subtle. It's a start.
It's so interesting because a lot of it, and you talk about this in the book too, but there's that perception, how important perception is when we look at body mindful yoga. And I'd love for you to expand on that a little bit.
On perception? So body image is actually a perception, right? It's not a fact. A lot of times I think we feel helpless to what we perceive as our body image as being a fact. Like this is, like we're stuck with these bodies, and, the negative talk just goes on and on. And our book is saying, well, guess what? It's a perception. And as, the owners of our perceptions, we have the power to shift our perceptions. And I understand that it's not, just simply waking up one day and deciding, oh, I'm going to shift my perception. I love my body now. Trust me, 20 years in eating disorder recovery, I know it doesn't work like that. But I think that that's a really important piece of information to take in, for all people. I share about an eating disorder, but not everybody has an eating disorder, and you don't have to really feel shame about your body or concerned about body image, or it can affect us in different ways. And so really taking in that truth that our body image is a perception, I think can be very eye-opening and offer a lot of hope.
Well, it's so important because, we talked about this earlier, we already have so much incoming that's so negative. And then we're dealing with, most people have pretty negative thoughts and words that they're kind of dealing with on a daily basis themselves. So to provide a spark of hope, that's just such an important thing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I feel like body mindful yoga does that, in so many ways. In the book, you talk about slogans, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about that, because most people would go like, slogans? I have to use a slogan. What?
Right. So we focus in on a few popular expressions or slogans in these different areas of our society. I mentioned food, but we also focus in on fitness, and we then also talk about social media and the language of belonging, and fashion and the language of status. And in those chapters, like you said, we zero in on some of these slogans that are popular. So I'll just go with the fitness chapter. So the theme here is how combat language often shows up in fitness marketing and in our, motivational, expressions, and what we see in ads and on TV and on social media and all the language around fitness. And it's like, we got to go to battle with our bodies. We got to go do battle with our bodies. We got to, burn this, shred that, shrink this, contain that, tame it, it's very, a lot of combat. And we look a little bit at the history of why that is. And it goes back to the relationship between fitness and the military. But then some of the slogans that we zero in on are no pain, no gain, win at all costs, just do it, and a few more. And what we do with those slogans is we kind of give the meaning. What does it mean? What does no pain, no gain really mean? Where did it come from? How did it get into our language around working out? And how do we kind of really just see it for what it means and take the charge out of it a little bit, right? And for some people, right, this type of combat language might not cause any problems for them. It might not ignite, guilt or shame or comparison or body image. It might be purely motivational, and we want to honor that. If that's how you feel about, for example, no pain, no gain, then wonderful. If you're someone who it kind of stirs some of that guilt, shame, and comparison in, then maybe taking a little time and doing some of the self-reflection exercises in the book could be really enlightening and helpful. So just to give you an example of some body mindful statements that we suggest in response to no pain, no gain, or as a replacement for it. Moderation gives energy and strength. Right? I feel healthy when I work out. Exercise increases my strength and boosts my energy. I am fit in mind, body, and spirit. Right? So these aren't overly flowery, oh, I love myself statements, because that's not always authentic for people, right? We need a starting point. We need a more neutral starting point. So we try to bring in some language that would feel a little more neutral. And then you could say, for example, then go to the second half of the book and do some of our practices and really focus in on some of this kinder language to help wire it in.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, my goodness, it's so important. I felt like the exercises were great because, there are some days, when people are like, I'm having a bad hair day. I don't really think I love myself today, or just things aren't going quite right. But there are other statements that they can use that will kind of help get them there and slowly shift all of that.
Exactly. So I think it's the awareness is that starting point, and I think it's so important. It's just because we just use language, we just talk, right? And our inner scripts just go on autoplay. And we don't realize that, there's a direct correlation between what's coming out of our mouth or what we're hearing inside and how we're holding our body, how we're dressing it, how we're, perceiving our bodies, perceiving other people's bodies. It goes so much deeper than we realize.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. I mean, I know in the book you talk about having goals. And I'd love for you to kind of just talk about that a little bit, because I think a lot of times when people think of body mindful goals, they can kind of get back into the trap of, I need to lose 10 pounds or I need to work out more often. And that's not what it's about.
Exactly. So early on in the book, we invite people to set some goals. And we give people the space to just just be really honest. What are your goals for your body? You want to write down, lose 10 pounds, get it all out on the paper, right? And then go back and look and notice, how many of those goals are based on changing your exterior or matching with some type of external ideal? Or how many of those, or which of those goals are because you're comparing yourself to somebody else or you want to look like your neighbor, right? And look, there's no shame in that, no shame in that. These are very human feelings and human experiences that we have when we're in this place. The concern, though, at least for me, is when we stay stuck there and we don't know how to validate ourselves, right? If we're only into external validation, we never really learn how to validate ourselves and we never really feel worthy. So to be a body mindful goal, it's a goal that is not going to be driven by guilt, shame, or comparison. So we're trying to get people to look to that higher spiritual benefit. If you don't like the word spiritual, that's okay. Maybe a value, right? So whereas, you might have the goal to lose 10 pounds, look like your neighbor, what are you really getting at? What else is there? Is there a different way to look at that? And is there a way to maybe even shift the goal so that it's more body mindful, it's more internally driven, it's more value-based, my goal is to build stamina. My goal is to enjoy health. My goal is to feel more alive, right? My goal is to do more activities with others, right? These have very different feel than my goal is to lose 10 pounds. My goal is to be a size X, whatever. My goal is to only eat 2 meals a day. They're all very combative, right? And the body mindful goal is going to be more internally driven. It's going to be more about wellness and health and how we feel from the inside.
And that's the only thing that matters is how we feel about ourselves and how we feel on the inside. And it's interesting, and I'm so glad that you talked about this because it's so often, and even not really, people do this not really even, I think, consciously, where they're doing these comparisons that are just unrealistic.
Yeah. Comparisons really throw us off our center, and once they start, it's kind of hard. It's like that domino effect. Then you start comparing everything about yourself to everyone else. And with every comparison, we are pulled further away from our center and what we know to be true about ourselves. And this approach that we're offering in our book is hopefully a pathway home inward to reconnect with what we know to be true about ourselves inside.
Oh,
And when we're in that place where we are centered and we are connected, we will stand taller. We will have more light in our eyes. We will, maybe choose to carry our bodies with a little more confidence versus maybe hunched shoulders and that feeling of I just want to hide.
Yeah, without a doubt, and it's just, it's interesting how all this kind of can snowball, and before you know it, people are in a place where they're like, how did I get here with how I feel about myself?
Yeah.
And I love because your book, Body Mindful Yoga, really gives people kind of a starting point that they can use today, and it gives these gentle steps and how to kind of reclaim their life, these really empowering steps.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy that you see them as gentle. That's really important to me. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I think we've all done it the other way, right? Where we're liquid diets and working out.
Yes.
And
that's why
enjoyable.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, gentle is so important because it's so opposite of what how we're trained to be. We're trained to be productive all the time, go, go, go. And I want to acknowledge that this material is not easy. It's not always comfortable to do this type of work with ourselves. It can feel really hard. And so I just want to give everybody a lot of compassion, who struggle in this way and are taking this step to do something for themselves and, to have support in your life while you're doing it too. If a lot of things get churned up when you're doing work on your body image or your self-esteem, have support. It's so important.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, and you talk about in the book, I think I have time for a couple more questions here. You talk about in the book about being a body mindful ambassador. So what is that? Because I know we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but, what does that look like and what does that even mean for ourselves?
Right. So this is the very last chapter, and this is after, you've done all that internal work and you've been doing your practices, and now it's time to kind of take what you're learning about yourself and bring it into the world. And not in a, showboaty way, just kind of like the example I used of the grocery store. It's about, eliminating body mindless talk, really eliminating negative talk about ourselves with other people. In this chapter, we give 7 or 8 tips on how to do that. And one that's coming to mind right now for me is, compliment on people's internal qualities and less on external qualities. So, even though a compliment about someone's hair or clothing may be completely innocent and completely sincere, right? It's not that the compliment is bad. It's just what we're getting at with that is that if we can stop replicating this need for external validation in others as well as ourselves and shift to the internal, if people were hearing how, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example real quick, but people were hearing oh wow, I so appreciate how kind you are. Or, oh wow, you're such an honest person. That's such an honorable quality. In hearing more and more of those type of compliments and less about our exteriors, we might begin to get be a little less obsessive about our exteriors too, right? So it's this idea of really letting go of external validation and modeling that for other people.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because, and I just love how your book talks about that, because when we do that from a place of we are doing this for ourselves and then we're modeling this for other people, it really takes off a lot of responsibility for how other people are, and we're just focused on how we feel ourselves, and it's 100% cool that way,
Yeah, absolutely. And we're showing ourselves that we can engage with the world differently. Every time we don't give a compliment on someone's exterior and choose to say something kind about an internal quality, like that's a shift. And we're showing ourselves that we have that language, that, we can think about internal qualities, and in time, we might be able to recognize them in ourselves.
Well, wouldn't that be nice, right?
It's all possible. It's all possible.
Well, and especially when you take baby steps to get there, so it's not
exactly.
Like you have to, run a 10K tomorrow if,
No,
walking
this is a lifelong, yoga is a lifelong practice. And we talk about this in the book. It's not just waking up one day and loving yourself better out of pure willpower, right? This takes repetition. It takes practice. It takes work.
Yeah, but it is obtainable. It is something that definitely
is
done, which
yes.
is very exciting. Well, and so where can people connect with you, Jennifer, and learn more, not just about your book, but all the great work that you're doing?
My website is www.yoga4, that's the number 4, eatingdisorders.com. And you're also welcome to email me, Jennifer@yoga4eatingdisorders.com. Again, the number 4. I work with individuals one-on-one, in person here in Philadelphia, and also online, virtually for people who don't live in Philadelphia. And I also do inspirational speaking, and I mentor professionals, and I write, I do a bunch of stuff. So happy to connect with anyone who's feeling called or this resonates with them and wants to learn more.
Well, and so let's talk about the work that you do and how you work with people. Now, do you work with people remotely? Is it done all in person? How does that work?
Sure. So I work with people in person if they're local to Philadelphia. I work out of Yoga Life Institute in Wayne, Pennsylvania, which is about 35 minutes from Philadelphia. And I also work virtually. I have clients all over the country, so that gives, working virtually allows me the opportunity to reach more people and do this great work with other people, people who aren't local to Philadelphia.
Okay, so it's nice because they can connect with you kind of regardless what's going on and where they're located and start their own journey today. And
exactly.
I believe you have some events that are coming up as well. Where can people learn about the events that you'll be attending or being a part of?
People can learn about my events on my website, yoga4eatingdisorders.com. They're also posted on my Facebook page, which is Jennifer Kreatsoulas. You can also search Yoga for Eating Disorders. And I'm also on Instagram as well, Jennifer Kreatsoulas. And I have 2 accounts, Jennifer Kreatsoulas and Yoga for Eating Disorders. The 4 is not the number 4 in that case. So.
Yes. There you go.
Yes.
Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Oh, thank you. It was lovely speaking with you. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. It's been such a pleasure to spend this time with you and, of course, to talk about your new book, Body Mindful Yoga. Again, Body Mindful Yoga is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie bookstores, and it's a great book to start off the new year. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.